So just so you guys know, when I do, I'll let you guys each say hi.
When we're live in a minute.
Oh,
Okay, we are live.
We're live. Awesome. Hello, everybody. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, terrific to be here.
Yeah, let's just do a quick hello. My name is Brandon Wolf. Glad to be here. Piper, do you want to say hello?
Hi, Piper Buelet. Wonderful to be here.
Renell?
Yes, thank you, Brandon and Piper. Happy to be here with everyone. Looking forward to it.
And Brett?
And I'm Brett Jarvis. Great to be here.
Okay, we're here today to talk a little bit about how to nail the interview, what recruiters want, what hiring managers want. Each of us have varied experience across our careers doing this, extensive experience, and we're excited to talk about some ideas and thoughts. First, we thought we'd start this thing off with a quick little 30-second snippet on who you are, as well as tell us a story, a quick story about an interview you were in, an interview you did, whether it was a disaster, whether it was amazing, just so we can get a little sneak peek into who you are. So let's start with you, Piper.
All right. So as I mentioned, Piper Buelet, I'm the VP of People for Imagine Learning in Provo. And let's see, my interview disaster was flying in for an interview and my luggage getting lost. And so luckily I was in a suit and did the afternoon, but then overnight I had to figure out how to get the suit cleaned. I had bought a new shirt, some new toiletries. So in the morning I was still in the same suit and completed that interview. And my luggage made it just as I was about to head back home. So of course, when I got back home, my luggage didn't make it home either. And I was offered the job, but I turned it down because I figured there were some omens in there, luggage getting away. So that's my interview horror story.
Nice. And then the quick on you, I mean, you're VP of People, so you're hiring people all the time, or you're dealing with resumes and recruiting. Tell us just for a second about that. So
yes, hiring people all the time, and we are hiring. So we did have our info session on the event this week. And it's very interesting to watch how these things have changed over time. And it's really hard for people sometimes to stay up with the changes, but you've got to make sure that you do stay abreast of what's changed in the world of recruitment. You know, how long should the resume be? That's always a loaded question for a lot of people, but also from the standpoint of making sure there's no typos in there and being professional. So those are some of the things that I see every day that, you know, every now and then you go, what's going on with people if they can't do those?
Cool. All right, Renell, you want to give us a little intro and your story?
Yeah, definitely, Brandon. Thank you. So hi, my name is Renell Hugh. I work for Adobe. I do product marketing, so I lead a product marketing team based out of our Adobe Lehigh office. And so the question around, you know, success or horror stories, I think with interviewing, it might actually happen to be somewhat similar to Piper's, but is a story about getting on a plane, heading down to Atlanta for a big convention where we're doing some interviews. They go grab a quick bite to eat. My friends didn't bring my bag on the plane, so when I got on the plane, my bag was on the plane, was still outside the plane, so I missed my flight. I had to fly all night to get to Atlanta, so Piper, where you came from. And when I got there, luckily I had enough time to shower and ran over to do my interview at the time with Microsoft. When I arrived, I composed myself. I was a little sweaty. Actually, it wasn't Atlanta. It was New Orleans, so it was a lot more humid and hot. Showed up, and the interviewer looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know, I'm doing great, but I'd love to have an extra 10 minutes to compose myself before we begin the interview." So she said, "Free for to take it." And so it actually led to a great interview process with them and great stories that they were like, they said, "You're pretty determined to do this interview and be on time." So we really respected that and appreciated that and loved the story of you traveling all night just to get here. So it turned out well. And I said, I ended up working at Microsoft sometime later, but those people that I interviewed with were some of the reasons why I was able to get that job later on. And so it turned out really well.
Very cool. And tell us about your interviewing experience. You've interviewed a lot. Have you hired people? Have you interviewed a lot?
Yeah, I have. So just to add on to that, so I definitely have. I've interviewed a lot. I spent the last probably 15 years of my career in marketing and have interviewed candidates from all different backgrounds in the marketing field. Currently, I have a team, so I do a lot of interviewing for our team, but also for Adobe. Spend a lot of time interviewing candidates of all different levels of skill set, whether they're entry level coming out of their bachelor's or their business school program, all the way to very senior professional individuals who are looking for opportunities within the organization at a direct level and above.
Awesome. Welcome. All right, Brett Jarvis.
Excellent. So Brett Jarvis, and I have been, I've led customer success and other roles in executive positions at places like Oracle and Salesforce and LinkedIn, and moved with my wife and 4 kids to Utah a couple of years ago, and delighted to get to be here and work more closely with Luke, who I knew at LinkedIn as well. And I've hired people in all sorts of positions, you know, from entry level and first time managers to executives and the like. And my funny story, you know, like Piper and Ronell had things happen to them, but I think this was of my own making. I also, you know, flew to the South for an interview. This is a few years ago, and got there. They put me up in a nice hotel. I, you know, was there, and I left at what I thought was enough time. And I made a wrong turn or two, and I was several minutes late to this interview after taking the whole flight and getting there and them taking good care of me, and was several minutes late. But you know, I think I just apologized and moved on, because at that point, what can you do? But and it brought to mind a story of somebody who was late to an interview a year or two ago with me, but he was late to the first interview. I didn't know he was late, but he let it sit with him so long that he apologized to everybody about being late, and he was bothering him the whole time. And I was like, dude, just throw that out, like, you know, and move forward, and difficult things are going to happen, and you've got to focus on what to do. So, I mean, on having your composure. Anyway, that was my big mistake.
Awesome. Okay, I'll wrap this up with the intro. My name's Brandon Wolf. I've been in mostly the technology industry my entire career, most recently executive over people operations. So hired, you know, 400 people in the last few years, but also interviewed all different types of people. My career kind of shifted between finance and operations and people operations. So I'm going to tell you a story from way back. This is when I was a couple years into college, getting used to the career scene, and these companies would come in and interview a swath of students, and then kind of slash everybody and pick a couple, their top ones to do internships. And I was in this interview, and it was going well. And then it got pretty technical into some stuff that I hadn't taken classes on. I was still kind of early in my college. And so I started to stumble on some of these deeper technical questions. And then somehow the interview turned to like family and background, and somehow like my parents' divorce came up, and like it was just the weirdest interview of all time. And I'm like teary eyed, and I'm like, I walked out of there going, I've like totally bombed, completely bombed this interview. And so it was a great learning experience. Sometimes when you crash and burn, you can learn the most from those. I ended up working for that company later, but not at that time. So good times interviewing. I think we all know there's interviews that go really well and you're feeling jazzed, but most of the time, I don't know a lot of people who love interviewing. I mean, it just feels like you're under this spotlight, you know, the whole time. So hopefully today we can talk about some stuff that'll get you prepared and help you know what to expect. We're going to spend, this is kind of how we're going to break up the time, just so you know. We're doing the intro session, and then we're going to talk for the next 5 or 10 minutes about what to do before you get to the interview, how to prepare. This is that kind of pre-interview. Then we're going to take a little bit more time, 10 to 15 minutes, talking about during the interview itself, and then a few minutes to talk about after, follow up, what you do there. And if you guys have questions, comments in the process, you can throw them into the live chat, and we'll kind of be watching those as well. But let's start first with before the interview. So as you guys think, call out, maybe each of you can kind of call out one key thing that you think is critical to do before the interview. Piper, why don't we start with you?
Research. Make sure you understand the company you're going to talk to and the people you're going to talk to. So do your research.
Okay, so what deeper can you take us? Like, what research should people be doing? Like memorizing facts like crazy. Like there's so much to know about a company. It's hard. You've got a website, you've got a job description that's typically vague, hard to understand what they really want in the role. What are some techniques for research?
Well, there's a couple things. So when you're talking about the company, it's really delving into what are you seeing about that organization, not only on social media, but in the business media. So you have a combination of what's happening in that organization, and does it match to who you are? And then the other part I would say is also around the research on the people you're going to interview with. So do you know anything about them? Can you find out some personal things about them, not just they worked here and they worked there, or they live here and they live there, so that you can figure out if there's a personal connection that you can bring to the interview once you get in the door.
Ronald, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would say, just to add on to what Piper was saying, I think, spend some time finding individuals, doing informational interviews with individuals in the company, right? That gives you a really good sense of the company. See if you can find individuals on that team or that work in that same function, because then that gives you a perception of like what type of things we need to be doing day to day. You get to learn firsthand from somebody who's doing that work at the company. And the other part that I think is important that you get to learn, is it a cultural fit or a fit for you personally? Like, one of the things I value is the people I work with and around. So I want to start to drive and get a sense of that and see if that's something that resonates. So that's one comment I'd add on to that.
And I'd say, as you're researching the people, make sure you understand, get a connection with them, something you can connect with them, understand them at some level. On LinkedIn, if they've posted items and, whether it be articles or they've commented on things, see those things and understand those things. But also you're going to want to understand, hey, this person is going to be interviewing me about this, right? So Brandon, in your example from before, you might have known that that person was going to be delving deep into technical issues. And so you might want to be ready for the more specific types of questions around experience or expertise. Another person might be interviewing you more for culture fit, and you need to be ready for that. And you need to be ready with your stories. What stories do you want to tell? What things from your past experience do you want to tell? Make them crisp and clear. And if you know which ones you're going to tell in advance, then you're going to know that they're crisp and clear and ready to go. And similar with questions. So you're going to want to, and I think, Piper and Renell, and you might have had some comments about questions as well, but you want to make sure that you've got your questions lined up for the right people that you're going to be speaking with also.
Yeah, back to one of the points you made around a story, an experience of something that you've done in the past. When we get a little bit into the digging into the interview itself, people want to know what you've done and can you do that again? Has it kind of been there, done that, or are you the type of person that can fit in? So a lot of times it's hard for people right on the spot. Tell me about a time when fill in the blank. And you're like, okay, let me think back. Gosh. So it is great to do some mental exercises ahead of time to think, here's some really concrete, great examples of where I've created a huge impact, made a difference. Here's what I've done. Whether you're really early in your career and you're pulling from school or community experiences, or whether you're really late in your career, one thing I would recommend is you're not picking examples that are more than a few years old. I've had some interviews where people are like, oh yeah, 15 years ago, I did this one thing. And I'm like, well, what have you done in the last 15 years? Like, that's crazy to pull something that long ago.
Right.
I want something that's relevant and active, right?
Yeah. Unless it was like a foundational experience.
Yeah,
right?
true.
Yeah.
Like, this is the foundational experience that I've built on, and this set me down this path or something, or is indicative of who
Fair
I am
point.
today or whatever.
Fair point.
There was a question that came through that said, how do I find people who work in those companies to be able to get that information? And, one of our participants, started off with, start with LinkedIn. And I would totally agree with that. Work through your network to find those individuals. And there's nothing wrong with asking them, can you give me 5 or 10 minutes? I want to learn about the company. This isn't asking them, hey, I'm trying to get a job there. Can you push my resume along? It's, I want to learn about the company and what you do.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that, Piper, because I think the next, somebody asked me, Jeffrey said, how do you go about pitching yourself to these people to spend time with you? And I think it's so critical, right? I think we talk about networking, you hear about it, but networking for me has always been learning about people, learning about why they do what they do, why they're passionate about it. And it gives me a good sense of where they're at today in their career. So I think being authentic in that way allows you to kind of approach it. And when I've approached people, I typically will say something to the effect of, hey, and I actually just did it recently. I reached out to somebody and said, hey, we used to work together back at Microsoft. I'd love to connect with you and learn about what you're doing today and learn about what we can do going forward together potentially. And that person shot me a message back. We've set up some time. We're going to talk about 15, 20 minutes. And it just was just like that. And so I think there's ways to do it, but if you're authentic about it and just make it very meaningful in terms of what you're asking for, I think you'll see that more people are willing to reach out and connect with you and talk about what they're doing and their company.
Yes.
And to just add on to the tail end of that, the easier you can make it on the person that you're asking the favor or request from, the better. If you send a note and says, hey, do you mind writing up a 4-page summary on why it's amazing to work at your company? I mean, no one's going to do that. But if it's quick, like Ronell said, hey, a quick touch base or something that's just really easy for somebody, it'll go a lot further.
Right. Right. And in the normal world, depending on the situation, you can take people out to lunch as well. People have to eat lunch. They're willing to eat lunch for free and to share with you more information. So.
Okay, so we've covered research the company, research who you're going to be talking to. Let's spend a minute on researching the role itself and the fit that, these job descriptions are really vague. How do you get a really crisp understanding of what you'll be doing day to day in and out? I'm assuming you'll follow a lot of similar things that we've talked about, reaching out to people. Are there any other tips you can recommend there?
Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
I would say an interesting one that I've used in the past, and even though job descriptions can be vague, if you take that job description and you put it in a word cloud, you kind of get an idea of what are the big things that are popping out. So you have some place to focus. It's just a little hint that a lot of people don't think about, but there's plenty of places you can go and put it in and you get the word cloud that comes out.
Yeah, that's great, Piper.
Okay.
Renell, you were going to say something.
No, I think I love that example actually, because it's a very, very simple way of just kind of seeing it and seeing what's important. I think as you read through, like typically what I do when I see a job description is when I read through it, I look at, where are my skill sets? How do they align? And what do I think I can really bring to this role? And what do I think I can learn from this role? Because for me, there's two parts. When I seek out a new opportunity, I have an opportunity to grow, but I also feel like an opportunity to give. So I try to find those things and I try to go through and say, okay, where do I fit in here? And what are the growth opportunities for myself? And that way I know I'm ready to talk about those things. I know where I can focus in on and really give good examples, crisp stories around it. But then I also can say, okay, here's areas where I may not have as much background, but I think that's why this role is important to me, right? And I think many people want that. They want to jump into something new potentially. And it's a great way to showcase that you've thought about it and you're giving meaningful attention to it.
That's a great comment. And not to shy away, a lot of people think, oh my goodness, I don't have these one or two things that they're asking for. Well, companies know that they're not going to get all 10 things almost all the time, right? And so if you don't shy away from that or hope they don't ask you about it or get afraid of it, then you've got a better chance of having a really good conversation. And if you instead own up to it and say, just like you're saying, hey, this is the opportunity for growth for me and I'm looking forward to it. And this is why I believe I'll be able to grow into it. That would be great. The other thing is normally you're talking with somebody at the company before you're, as part of the interview process. Maybe you're talking with a recruiter, an external recruiter, maybe the recruiter internal to the company first. And you have the opportunity to engage with them and ask them some more pointed questions about the role and what exactly people are looking for. Maybe what words would come out if they were doing word cloud, like what's more specific for them. And that's fine to ask those types of questions.
Right.
I'm seeing a question over here in the chat pod real quick, actually from Jasper. He says, I have two internships, multiple certifications, and a bachelor's from great schools, yet I'm still having trouble landing an entry-level role. What advice would we give to Jasper, people who are in similar situations to Jasper?
I would quickly on that one say, there is a lot of noise when you're hiring candidates. So from a hiring manager's perspective, we've posted jobs where you get 300 to 400 people applying for it within a 2-week period of time. And so that's a lot of noise. So you just have to line up everything that's important. How am I can I connect with people into the company? Can I get my resume looking really good? Can I, ideally you're touching on all these things, but I will say it's easiest to hire somebody when it's like, wow, if like Ronell, been there, done that. He could come in and immediately provide value. You know, if you're a hiring manager and you're saying, wow, yes, all the way down, it's about decreasing the risk for the company in taking you on. Because if they take you on and you're not good fit, not a good culture fit, you can't execute, you can't perform, that's a ton of work for the company to then try and get you to succeed and then get rid of you. But it's like, if you come in and you're like, boom, 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 it's like, great, let's hire you. Let's give you an offer right now.
Right.
And so you need to put yourself in the shoes of what you're going for. How do you articulate yourself in a way that is like, look, I've been through these tough things to get here, and this is how I can help your company.
Right. And let's use this to transition into talking about the interview itself as well. And you know, Jasper, if you're talking and having a decent amount of interviews, or others like you, and it's just not working out, then I think, Piper, something you were talking about earlier in our conversations would be really helpful, which is that, you know, at the end of the interview, you're allowed to ask, and should ask, you should go for the close. And do you want to talk about that, Piper? Because I think you talked about it great.
Sure. So what most people don't do is, when the interview ends, there's 2 questions that you can ask. And one of those is, are there any red flags that you see about how I responded to the questions and seeing me in this role? And allow your interviewer to answer that. And you'll find there are a lot of interviewers who will give you some feedback, some may not, but it gives you a chance to respond to that before you leave that interview. The other thing to say is, we call it the sales close, is to really talk about, if it's true that you're really interested in the role, you're looking forward to the next steps in the process, and you are excited about what you've heard today or whatever has transpired so far, so that they know you have an interest, versus, okay, it's time to go, I'm gonna leave because I've been nervous the entire time. So.
Yeah.
So let's keep talking about the post. We were going to do the pre, during, and post. Let's just wrap up the post, because I want to spend more time on the during the interview and those kind of things. But what else do you do? So let's say you've been through the interview, you're wrapping up, you show interest at the end. I mean, should you, at the tail end of the interview, do you guys recommend being really aggressive, like, wow, I want this job? Or do you want to play hard to get a little bit? What have you seen successful at the tail end of an interview?
I'll take this one. I'll start at least, but I tend to show excitement throughout the interview. We all should, right? As you're going through the process, make sure that your posture is right, but you're showing excitement. And if you feel like after going through the interview, because much of the interview process, and I learned this a while ago, it's as much about you as the candidate as it is about the company. But sometimes we tend to, as the candidate, you're like, why? Either you're in desperate need of a job, or you really want to get, or you're like, you're not sure, but you have to know that you're interviewing the company too. And if that excitement is still true at the end of the interview, express that you're excited about the role, that you're excited about what you learned today, and you're looking forward to moving forward to the next round or hearing more. And I think what Piper was saying, one of the things I like to close out the conversation is around asking that question, like, hey, do you think I'm a great fit for this role? And if not, where are my gaps? So if there's anything I can respond to, I can. And I think that's super helpful. But I think it's really great when I see candidates that are like, yes, I'm excited about it, because it shows, right? And that makes you more willing as a hiring manager to say, I think this person might be a person that will work well with my team.
Yeah, you want to hire people who want to be there and
Yep.
who are excited about being there.
So as you wrap up that interview then, and as you're leaving, what do you do after that? Do you write the thank you card? Do you write the thank you email? Do you send a box of donuts? What do you guys see as the best gesture to kind of do after an interview?
Well, I'll start with that one, because there was also a question that came in from, I think it's Kayla, as far as the appropriate amount of time to follow up. So, you know, I'm still a fan of the thank you note. Not everybody is, whether it's an email or a handwritten one or whatever, because as a hiring manager, that tells me something about the individual. And I think that you have to compare that to what you heard within the organization to say, does this fit with the company that I'm about to, interview with, or I interviewed with, and I'm very much interested in. So don't get gimmicky, but a nice little short thank you note is great. As far as timing for the follow-up, the first thing is sending that thank you note. And through your interview, you should be asking, what are the next steps and what's the timing, because that helps you to know when to follow up. It's kind of simple, but most of the time we don't ask that question when we're in the interview because we're nervous.
Yeah.
And a lot of people doing the interview, the interviewer will let you know what next steps are, what next steps will be, and that should be what should happen. But yes, exactly. You should be making sure that you understand what next steps are as you leave. Sorry, Renell.
I was going to add one more thing what Piper said, and it's super critical. I'm a person who truly believes in the handwritten note. And I think one of the critical things you can do as you're going through the interview, as you're waiting for the next interview, take down notes. What did you like about the interview? What do you think was relevant for you in that role? What did you want to express back to the person who you're sending the note to? And then, you know, if you're getting on a plane to come back, I think, you know, it's ready, so you can jot them down really quickly, write those notes, and you can send it back immediately. So it shows that you're prepared and you're really thoughtful about it. But I found that's helped me as I've gone through interviews, just to take down some notes on what I learned in that interview or what my of how I felt about it, and then express that in a nice note, concise, back to that individual. And I think that's super meaningful, right? So I just wanted to add that bit in there.
I
And
agree.
as we say, the note cannot be the same for every single person.
That's right.
Yep.
They're talking to each other.
Some words are
Yeah.
good. I'll often reach out to people on LinkedIn. Being a former LinkedIn guy, I'll reach out to people on LinkedIn too and use that as my, you know, ask for a connect, include a note, you know, as personalized note within that, and use that as my thank you note as well.
Yeah.
Well, somebody has asked the question, where do you send a handwritten note, Michelle, in the COVID working world? That's a good question. I think LinkedIn might be a great way to tackle that. I think if you have the opportunity to use InMail and you can send, you know, notes that way, that might be a great way to do that, because it's a great question. Like, it may not reach them for months in the current landscape. So,
all right, let's
Try
get to
something
the interview
different.
itself.
Yeah, try something different and snap a picture of your handwritten note and then send it over. I don't know how many times that's been done.
Sanitized version.
Okay, so let's go to the meat. Yeah, let's go to the meat of this during the interview. So when does the interview start, Piper?
Interview starts as soon as you cross the threshold of the building or location that you're going into. Anybody that you come in contact with, whether it's the cleaning person, the receptionist, or whomever, acknowledge that they exist and they're human beings and give them a hi and a hello and a smile, because how you treat everybody else is being watched, whether you think it is or isn't. And there's several times that I've gone out to, you know, my front office folks and said, so tell me what you thought about the candidates today.
Yep, absolutely.
Says a
Maybe
lot
even
about
as
you.
maybe even as you approach in your car, you know, the person that's in your way to get to the interview or whatever, they might be working there also.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't cut anybody off in the parking lot. Not a good thing to do.
So you get through the first thing to get into the. I want to spend just a second talking about the first couple of minutes that you're in with an interviewer, because I think this is a critical time. There's been a whole bunch of research done on the fact that in the first 20 seconds, 30 seconds, interviewers will already make an assessment of whether they think you're going to be a fit for the role. And then over time, over the rest of the interview, they're basically proving themselves, like looking for validation that initial impression was right. So we all know about unconscious bias, and unfortunately, no matter how much you try to be unbiased, people are going to have some sort of bias. So no pressure or anything, but that first few minutes, I think, in the interview is absolutely critical. If you need the 10 minutes before the interview, like Renell needed that one time, I mean, get ready for that, because you're going to go in and just be yourself and spend a couple minutes. I think at the first of this interview is just connecting with the individual that you're going to be interviewing with. What can you guys add to that first few minutes?
Yeah, well, you had some thoughts, Brandon. I thought about that. Did you want to?
Yeah.
Share?
Yeah, I can continue on that. So
Yeah.
First of all, you want to kind of feel out the person that you're interviewing with. I kind of see the world. You can kind of bucket people into two categories. One is like, let's just get straight down to business. I'm going to drill these questions right now and let's go. Forget the chit chat, shoot the bull stuff. And then there's the other kind of more relational type individual that you really have to have that connection, or else they're not going to feel the connection for the entire interview. I would recommend in both cases, you want to at least attempt a little bit of connection with with the individual. And if you see it's more of a relationship type person, then you spend a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer than you would have with the other type of person. But connect, get to know, like spend a few minutes just commenting with each other, asking them questions, they ask you questions, make it a two-way conversation so you don't feel like, you're sitting on one side just getting interrogated the entire time.
That's right. It's your opportunity to make that connection and ask a question or two that you've figured out from your research, or make a comment or two that you figured out from your research. So for example, I saw one company when I was interviewing with them, they had recently been given an award. And so I made a comment to somebody who's relevant. If I see somebody has lived where I've lived, know somebody that I know, and I realize it's a stronger connection, it's not just a potential connection that might not exist, I'll make some comment, or they're interested in something I'm interested in, or speak a language I speak, whatever, you can make some sort of comment there. And then, but make that connection is really important. And it helps the interviewer as well, because what do interviewers want? Interviewers want to be hiring somebody, and they want that person to be, to be fitting into the culture. And they want to know that they're going to be working with that person and enjoying working with that person, that will be someone they want to be around. And someone engaging with them is going to help in making that happen.
Renell, do you have anything to add?
I was going to add on to that too. I think you've done a lot of research right before, so that pre-work that we talked about. And this is where I think the pre-work comes into play. So depending on the type of person you have, like Brandon shared, I think be ready to answer some key questions, some quick questions. Why this role? Why this company? Why this location? All those things, are you prepared? And one of the things I learned as I've gone through interviews multiple times with different companies has been, for me, it's have like at least 3 to 5 reasons why this role and why the company. So I just know, like, hey, I like the company because of X, Y, and Z, and I can share with them why that fits with me and my background, my skill set, my passion. And so it shows that you've put some thought into it. And I think it leads to that already developing that relationship, because people will see that you put work into it. You understand who you are, and you're now ready to represent yourself in like a minute. When they ask those questions, you can deliver what you feel represents you well as it relates to those 3 questions.
And Renell, on that, oh, go ahead, Piper.
I was going to say, Susan had a question here that people tell her she's overly friendly and that it comes across as a bad thing. And, am I not supposed to connect, when you're commenting on a picture as you're going to the office? And Susan, I would say to you, if you go into an environment where you feel that they're looking at you like you've got 5 heads, it's probably not the right place for you. And you might want to look to work for somebody else. I know that sounds weird in one way, but what you encounter as you go in is a precursor to what it's like to work in that organization. So,
and we have to admit that you're nervous going into an interview. So sometimes you can get overly talkative, or sometimes you can get overly like trying too hard. Just make sure if you go in with the mindset of this is a two-way interview, I'm interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing me. And if you go into a company that you wouldn't naturally fit in, you have to kind of fake being someone else that you're not. I'm not saying that's the case, Susan, but just do a self-assessment. Say, if this is me and they don't like who I am, then I really don't want to be here anyway, because I don't want to be fit into some mold that they want me to be in that I'm not.
Yeah. And getting back to one of the comments you made originally, Brandon, like no one likes to interview. I think you can get to like to interview, because if it's a conversation and you like talking with people, and it's around a topic that's your career, which you should, be liking or enjoying, otherwise you should probably switch your career, and so it's going to be topics that you want to talk about. So then you go, hey, this is a great conversation where I get to talk about something I really like to talk about. And so, and you get multiple of those, and you've got to recognize, you only need one of these places to like you that you also like, to your point. And, you don't need everybody to like you. And it's going to be this conversation where you work together. I was going to pick up on one thing Renell was talking about as well, with the comment of knowing why you want to work at the place. Because when that question comes, I've seen way too many people use that as an opportunity as why they want to run screaming from their previous job or the job they currently have. And that is not what that question is. That question is, do you understand this company? Do you understand this job? Do you like this job? Are you excited about it? What can you bring to this job? This is not the opportunity for you to complain about your current job, because as soon as I hear somebody complaining about their previous job and current job, and that's what they choose to do with that, I think that's what they're going to bring to this company also, is complaining about it. And so it's an easy one to miss if people get the wrong mindset there.
So that's a great point. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I always say, leave your baggage in the trunk before you walk in the door.
Great comment.
So you want to keep the negativity away. Is it okay to admit failure, admit mistakes, admit challenges you've had in the past? What do you think, Ronell?
I think it is. You know, one of the things I look for when I'm interviewing, I'll ask a question and I say, tell me about a time. And it's always like, yeah, I did this great. And I ask the follow-up question, which is usually like, well, what were some of the things that you wish you would have learned, or that you learned that you wish you would have done better? Because when somebody tells me that it was always great, like, well, we all know that we all have failures, or you did something probably wrong. And I want to see how they handle that.
Exactly.
Because tell them the great story is like, that's easy in my mind, right? But when you really get down to it, the struggle that you had, or something that you approached this person incorrectly as you were collaborating on something, like, how did you fix that? And that gives me a lot of intel in terms of like how you could probably work within our company environment and the culture that we have. So I think it works really well. It works the interviewer's benefit, or the interviewee's benefit, because they're showcasing who they are, and it allows us to see, hey, we're going to learn and grow, and that's somebody I want to work with.
Great comments.
We got one comment on the chat that says, if you do some research about the interviewer and find interesting things you can relate to or relate with, at which part of the interview do you bring this up? I think it's great to kind of kick off with that as you're talking about it, or just see how it naturally flows in the conversation. You have these little gems that you want to tap on. Make it natural. Don't seem like right when you get to them, you're brain dumping a whole bunch of stuff like, oh, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
Don't
just
bring up your flashcards.
Yeah, it's like, just make it natural. And if you can slip it in here and there, great. It'll fit naturally. It'll only backfire if it's really unnatural.
Right.
Okay, we are actually getting really low on time. I'm blown away how fast this time goes. What else? Let's talk. What other major things should people keep in mind during the interview itself?
I would say mindset. One of the things that I've learned over the years is when I go into an interview, I look at it as I'm going to go make some new friends, whether I get the job or not. And so it's a mindset, and it actually puts me in a state of mind that allows me to be much more relaxed during that process than if I was like, it's make or break. I get the job or I don't get the job.
Yeah.
It's a great comment. Building on that even further, one of the things I wanted to say is, you know, no matter how much you need this job or have to have this job, you cannot come across as really needing or having to have this job, because human beings are really strange in that, you know, if you really need a job, people go, well, I wonder why they really need this job, you know? And so it just doesn't work that way. So you've got to be interested, enthusiastic, excited about the job and the like, but you can't come across as being desperate.
No, I love that statement, Brett, because I think a lot of times you have to let your confidence and your ability shine through, like in yourself, right? Like, it's not arrogance. It's just like, hey, I know what I can do. And I think just being that prepared and that aware of who you are is super helpful. And it takes time, right? Like I went through several iterations of myself to get to the point where I am today. And it took trial and error. And that trial and error helped me. And a lot of it was just asking for feedback, right? And where possible. I think a key thing that I wanted to add to this was, as you're thinking about that kind of the meat of the interview process, thinking about, you know, they're asking you questions. Don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions, right? A lot of times an interviewer will ask you a question and then you'll like just dive right in. Like, and it's like, they may be waiting for you to ask an additional question to get better context, but your thought is like, well, I have this, I know the response to this question. I have it really nailed down. And I found myself that when you just pause and just reflect and then say quickly, hey, here's a thought. What would you think about this? And that gives me incremental information that I can then use in my overall response.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, the question and answer process in the interview can make or break an interview. There's been so many times where I've decided not to hire a candidate because when I ask a question that I expect a 30-second response on, and they take 5 minutes to respond, and I only have 45 minutes to meet with this person, it's like digging a deeper grave for the person. You know what I mean? Like, so you've got to read your interviewer. You've got to be concise. A lot of times a question will be asked hypothetically, like what would you do in this kind of situation? Don't end it hypothetically. You can give some context, but say, here's an actual example of what I've done. And then you give a quick example. And if the interviewer wants to know more, they can always dig deeper. You can ask the question, did that answer your question? And they can say, well, let me dig deeper, or yeah, that was great. Let's move to the next thing. So just keep that timing in mind, that it's really helpful to be concise and be specific with examples. And then the other thing I'd throw in here is, if you're interviewing with 3 or 4 or 5 different interview panels or groups or individuals, don't use the same example over and over and over and over again. They're going to all come together and say, oh, they told you about that one. Oh, they told me that. Oh, they told me that too. And it shrinks down the value of what you can provide. But I know sometimes it's hard to think up more stuff, but just do your best to try and give different examples.
And talking about questions and asking questions, the more relevant your questions are, and asking questions shows your enthusiasm and interest in the job as well. So definitely do not shy away from asking questions.
There were a couple of questions before we wrap up, because I think these two are important if we've got at least a minute for you, that were around gaps of employment, as well as, I got hired by a company and left because it wasn't a good fit. How do I approach that in the interview? And for gaps, I would basically say, just be honest about, if you got laid off, you got laid off. If you got fired, you got fired. But if there's a gap, what have you been doing in the gap while you're looking for the job? If all you can say is, I've been looking for a job, that doesn't tell me that you're really excited or still looking for things and learning and doing all those things. So it's like, what are you doing in between those roles? And it's the same thing for a company. If you found it wasn't a good fit, say that, but also talk about what you learned about yourself and what you're looking for now. So you can approach it in that manner.
It's great, Piper.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are out of time. That went by so fast. There's a lot to talk about here, but thank you.
I learned a lot. This has been great. Yeah.
So thanks for being with us today.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Hope you have a wonderful day, and best of luck.
And feel free to throw questions in the Slack. We'll still
in the Slack. Yeah. That'd be
Absolutely.
great.